what we're going to do today is have 3 short talks. And these 3 short talks are first of all going to be from Sanghagita, then from Simon, and then from myself. And they're 3 short talks that fit into our theme. And the theme we've been looking at is shocking Buddhist ideas. So they're ideas which at first you might think just go against everything that our culture thinks is right, for instance. You know, ideas that make you think, surely not. Ideas like, I don't know, you don't always have to believe your thoughts, for instance, that kind of idea. Or, I can't remember any of the others actually, but... So tonight is a chance to have 3 personal talks where we talk about particularly, shocking ideas that have had an effect on us, on our lives and our practice. So we each have 15 minutes to do that, and Mokhtar is ready with the fantastic, she's got the yoga frog.
Hooray.
And she will wave that when we get maybe about 13 minutes or something like that. Great. So I'd like to really welcome Sanghagita.
That's good. So Gampopa. Gampopa was a great 11th century Tibetan teacher. And in his Dual Ornament of Liberation, Gampopa defines laziness. And this was the teaching that I thought was extremely shocking. This was the thing that really made me sit up and take notice. He defines laziness as being constantly busy and constantly active in 2 particular ways: defeating enemies and making money. He says this is laziness. So Sanghagita, the founder of our movement, made that accessible and understandable for us now. He said what that actually means for us now is saying, quote, being lazy really means being busy doing something that is not conducive to skillful mental states. One's busyness actually prevents one from being aware of what one might otherwise be engaging in. So I remember when I first heard this, it was absolutely back to front and upside down from everything about how I knew to be in the world, especially at work. I was so intrigued by it, but I didn't understand it. When I first heard that teaching, I was in a very high-pressured full-time job, and there were certain views at work about laziness. And I completely took it for granted. If you weren't feeling stressed out of your mind and absolutely up to your eyes, then you were probably not pulling your weight. You were, in other words, you were lazy. And that was it. Nobody ever said that, but it was definitely there, the undercurrent was there. So to be considered an effective teacher, you had to be pushing yourself up against what was humanly possible. You had to be constantly doing that. All the available time in the day had to be put to good use. So breaks were for contacts with parents, lunch hours were for meetings or activities with the kids. After school, more meetings, evenings, marking or preparing for meetings. And a day that had been absolutely crammed full with things that I could tick off my to-do list was a really successful, productive day. And nobody could have called me lazy. Nobody could have said I wasted a minute of my time. I was highly organised, which meant that my diary was absolutely crammed full of things to do, and I did them efficiently, and I pulled my weight. So one day, then at the North London Buddhist Centre, someone gave a talk on this teaching, Sanghagita's reworking of that teaching. And I heard that to be busy in this kind of way was laziness, and I was deeply shocked. The drive to achieve that I'd always seen as such a positive thing turned out to be a form of laziness. I wasn't a politician or in business, but I knew when I heard this teaching that it was aimed at the way I was driven. It was probably about 10 years ago when I first heard that teaching, but have I learned very much about it since then? Well, it wasn't long after that I demoted myself back to classroom teacher, which was great. And then I went to live in Amsterdam, and I had a much simpler life. And when I came to Sheffield, I probably was less lazy in that way, partly because I was working in the evolution shop. And that was great practice for that kind of being driven, because if you were like that, you would certainly be picked up on it by your friends. Evolution was a shop that was we ran the shop together from the side from here. And it was just a group of friends working together. And you couldn't sustain working in that way, the way that I had in London, because there wasn't any need for it, really. And I loved it. I loved working in that context and working for Tree Ratner, which I loved. And then the shop shut. And that was very sad. And that's why this is the topic for my talk. Because I'm trying to make my living out of singing. And I've chosen to engage in the world of business. So that teaching of Gampopas is very live for me. So I'm out there quite a lot nowadays, thinking about how I can get work, talking to people about how I can get work, having lots of exciting meetings with people about getting work. And I felt the old drive returning, and it occupies quite a lot of my time and my thoughts. The thing is, I'm not selling arms or selling meat. I'm getting people to sing, which brings great benefit, and people love it. I do realise that if I'm successful, then that will bring people a lot of joy. And I also love what I'm doing. It's so much fun. It's the best job I've ever had. I also try to be ethical. I don't rip people off. It's an opportunity to practice kindness and encouragement and give people confidence. In loads of ways, it's a great opportunity to practice the precepts and have the best fun ever. But I do feel uneasy about this teaching, about being lazy. It's because I know deep down that there are times that I'm engaged in my work in a way that is to do with asserting my ego, that's putting me in competition with others. And that really cringy thing when I find that I'm talking to somebody and then I realise that they might be useful in some way and they suddenly become so much more interesting. And it's just, such a shame when I notice that that's happened. That kind of subtle grabbing and pushing and shoving and striving where success becomes an end in itself is the kind of laziness that Gampopa is talking about. That I let my higher ideals slide, that I forget what I could otherwise be engaged in, that I choose the easier option, going along with the rest of society and making my aim, making lots of money, and maybe being a bit famous, rather than the much more difficult goal of enlightenment itself. So this is a constant tension, and I certainly don't think I have the answers about how to live a Dharma life in the world of business. And I'm not saying that I can't be in the world in that way and live a Dharma life. With a bit of awareness, I can probably do some good with my business, as long as I continue to meditate every day and stay in good contact with my friends, study the Dharma and come to the centre. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't make just as much progress. But underneath, there's a view about my success around my business, and that's to do with being successful as a human being. It's a bit like if I'm successful in the business, then I'm successful as a human being. And if I fail, the business fails, then I fail as a human being. It's like I can't really believe that worldly success doesn't matter, or that I need to work hard to be successful, to be useful. So since I started the business, the drive to achieve has returned. And that makes me really scared of wasting time. Have to make good use of my time. And it's such an interesting thing to reflect on. It's that idea of wasting time. I was brought up not to waste a good sunny day by being inside, for example. Not to waste my time doing A when I should be doing B. To use my time has to be a good thing, doesn't it? Especially when I'm trying to get work and trying to get something started. But that old habit of trying to push myself and trying to fit a ridiculous amount of things into one day can't be a positive, healthy drive. If I have half an hour to spare, I'm immediately trying to think of what I can do so I'm not wasting time. When I remember, I try to just sit and do nothing. I'm going to come back to this. But it's so hard to do. Even sitting and drinking a cup of tea is hard, but it's just sitting and not even doing that. It's like the urge to do, the urge. I actually found that I was doing that when the first time I ever tried it, just sitting and doing nothing. I was like that. Like it's a physical urge to be on the move, to go, to get on with it, to make good use of my time. Sanghagita says about this, he says, you yourself are the justification for your existence. You are an end in itself. So don't be ashamed of sitting around doing nothing. Glory in it. Do things spontaneously, out of an inner satisfaction and achievement. And this is the best bit. It is a virtue to be ornamental as well as useful. So I'm going to come back to that later. So I asked Helen if she would mind my mentioning her name about this next teaching that's come from Helen Freak, our friend. And she said she wouldn't mind because she's really interested in this and would welcome anyone who wants to talk to her about it. She had a very strong realization recently in relation to this, the third precept in relation to being busy. So there's the precept of stillness, simplicity, and contentment. And she says that when she breaks the other precepts, she feels free. Free is the name for positive shame, that kind of uncomfortable feeling you get when you haven't lived up to your ideals and you feel that stab of, or that like I get when I know that I've done something that I wished I hadn't. It's a positive kind of shame. She gets that when she breaks other precepts. So if she takes the not given or doesn't speak truthfully, she feels free, she feels that shame, and she tries to put it right. But when she breaks the third precept of stillness, simplicity and contentment in relation to her work, by working really hard to achieve and pushing herself to achieve more and more, she doesn't feel shame, she doesn't feel free. And I thought that was really fascinating. And I thought, well, I don't feel that either. In a way, I kind of feel proud. I don't feel shame at all in that way about breaking that precept, even though I know I'm doing it quite a lot. You know, it's almost pride that I feel rather than shame. If I've been busy all day and I've ticked loads off my to-do list and I've had a productive day. And I wonder how many times in a day that I've lost my awareness and been unknowingly unskillful. I wonder how many times I've set up those conditions that have led to me to deepening unskillful habits rather than weakening them. So this drive isn't confined to the world of business. And Sanghagita didn't intend it to be. He said it was about having things being conducive to skillful mental states. Those are mental states that come from generosity, kindness, and seeing things how they really are. It's just as easy to transfer all of this to our Dharma life. How many times have we joked about full diaries and meeting with friends and Sangha Nights, festivals, meetings, study nights? If we wanted to, we could spend practically every minute of every day engaged in activities we see as being part of our Dharma life. And all of these things are really, really important to do. They're really important to be engaged in. But when it gets to the point we've got so much of these things crammed into our week that it's no longer conducive to skillful mental states, then we have to look again at what Gampopa is saying about busyness being laziness, and to be honest about why we feel the need to be constantly on the go. And that reason will be very personal. So how can I make sense of this in a world where I have to be, well, I choose to be, out in the world of business? What does it mean to be ornamental as well as useful? Well, I'm not going to give up my business. I know I'm not. I'm really excited about it, and it's going really well, and I want it to be successful, and I have to earn my living. And I also see it as a creative and potentially beautiful thing to bring beautiful music into the world. It connects me and helps others. So I'm clear about that. I also don't want to be lazy. I want to make sure that as far as possible my work is conducive to positive mental states, to skillful mental states. And this sounds really easy. This next bit sounds a bit easy to be true, but it's incredibly difficult for me. I think it's very, very profound and also very, very difficult. I'm just going to stop I'm just going to sit still. Every day I'm going to take, thanks lunchtime, I've got 2 minutes left. I'm going to take Sanghagita's advice and put it into my diary. I'm going to write in my diary, say 12:15 to 12:45, doing nothing. Just wasting time. Just sitting around with no reason, nothing to justify my existence, no striving for anything, not even trying just to be. I'm just going to sit and stare. And I've said this before, again, I've said it before and before. I used to say it in the shop, Moksha Charles heard me say it many times, but I still never did it. I'm really going to try. I've never done this, so you can ask me in a few weeks. Please ask me, how is the doing nothing going? Please ask me. It's like that, and I want to sing it. Oh no, shall I sing it? Or we can all sing, I'm busy going, not doing nothing, working the whole day through, trying to find lots of things not to do. I'm busy going nowhere, isn't it just a crime? I'd like to be unhappy, but I really can't find the time. That's not the end of the talk. This is the end of the talk. Because it's a really beautiful thing that Sanghagita talks about. Mozart said that it's not the music that makes it beautiful, it's the pauses in between the music that makes it beautiful. And Sanghagita says this, and it's really beautiful because it's very relevant to me as well. It is the pauses which make the beautiful music of our lives. It is the empty spaces which give richness and significance to them, and it is the stillness which makes them truly useful.
My talk doesn't have a song, I'm afraid. I'm going to be talking about love. And romance and finding that perfect someone that completes us and makes us feel happy for the rest of our lives. I'm going to be talking about the kind of love that people dream about and that we see in movies and read about in great literature. I'm going to be talking about in reality, this kind of love is a complete myth and it doesn't exist. Now, as someone who's getting married in 7 months, this might sound like a strange thing for me to be standing here saying, but I don't think it is. I think it's actually an honest and realistic thing for me to be saying. And entering into a marriage with honest and realistic intentions and expectations, I think it's a lot more likely to last and work out. Now, when I say this movie romantic love is a myth and that it doesn't exist, I'm not saying that love doesn't exist at all. I'm sure anyone who's been married a long time or is in a relationship or has children can confirm that love does actually exist. What I'm saying is romantic love doesn't exist. Now that doesn't mean to say that you can't find someone that you can be happy with for the rest of your life and someone that you will, can stay in a relationship. That's not what I'm saying at all. If that was the case, I wouldn't be getting married to Sophie. And if I was standing here saying that now, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't be marrying me. So what do I mean when I say romantic love's a myth? Well, what I'm talking about is this idea that we're sold in today's society, that we see in the movies and on TV, and that we read about in books and poetry. This idea that there's one person out there who will ignite passion and lust in us every single time they're in a room, who will give us butterflies in his stomachs every time we're on his way to meet him. That there's going to be this fire between you that's never ever going to dim, and it's always going to be burning hot. And that they will always, no matter what, make you happy. This is what I'm talking about when I say romantic love. This is the kind of love that, according to Buddhist teachings, it can't exist. The Buddha taught that nothing's permanent. Nothing lasts forever, flowers are going to wilt, mountains are going to crumble, people are going to die, and romance can't last forever. This, as I said a minute ago, doesn't mean that we can't find someone that we can spend our lives with. We all know people who've been married and happy together right up into old age and even right up to death. and that throughout they've had great feelings towards one another, feelings of compassion, empathy, of connection, and yes, of love. But is the nature of that love consistent? Is it the same as it was 20 years ago? Is it the same as it was 10 years ago? Is it even the same as it was a year ago? Is it the same as it was when they got together, full of passion, and when they got married? The answer, if we take the teaching of impermanence into account, is no, of course not, it can't be. We've all experienced what it's like to be in a new relationship, when you constantly want to be around each other, touching each other all the time, spending a ridiculous amount of time in bed together, when you spend hours staring into each other's eyes and your fingers intertwined and you just make all your friends sick and not want to be around you. And while that's great and enjoyable at the time, it doesn't last. In the books and films, we're led to believe that this is how it is forever. A boy meets a girl and with some awkward but amusing sort of dating debacles, they eventually get together, and this is how they live for the rest of their lives, full of this lust and romance, and they live in absolute bliss. And this is what society tells us is the ideal relationship. But it's not real. That relationship doesn't exist. It can't. Because we're conditioned beings. We're subject to impermanence. And we're constantly in a state of change. From moment to moment, and so the nature of our emotions and feelings towards other people is also subject to change. The intensity of a new relationship can't be sustained. Eventually we grow used to having our partner around all the time, and it's less exciting, and we know what their eyes look like already, and we've got other things to do apart from spend all day in bed together. Our relationship changes, and it's probably for the best. Otherwise we just never get anything done and people won't want to be near us. This romantic phase that we're led to believe is what it's all about and what will last forever has passed. This doesn't mean that feelings towards our partners is in any way lesser. Just that, as with everything, it's changed, it's evolved, it's turned into something else. It may be that we find that we've grown apart as a couple, or it may be that we find what's arisen between us is something much stronger, a deeper, more honest connection than this initial passionate stage. Regardless of which way it goes, the one thing we can guarantee is that it will change, and it will continue to change. Now, some people might think that this is quite a bleak way for a man who's about to get married to think about love, but I don't think it is. And luckily, Sophie agrees with me. Well, this would be a really awkward talk to begin with. I personally think that once you acknowledge that our connections with other beings are in a constant state of flux and change, we can really see that actually we need to nurture the bonds that we hold dear with people. We need to work at them and create the conditions in which they can grow in a positive direction and flourish. Without really understanding the impermanent nature of our relationships, it's easy to become complacent and eventually we'll drift apart. This is something that I know certainly for me has been the case in the past, and only by realising the need to look after my relationships and nurture it have I been able to put the effort in that it needs and deserves, instead of just expecting everything to stay the same and be great. Another thing we're taught as Buddhists is the danger of a false refuge. A refuge that's unsafe, inconsistent, and ultimately impermanent. In my life, false refuge has been a huge theme, actually, and I think it has for most of us. They come in many different shapes and sizes. For me, it's been drugs, alcohol, parties, television, possessions. The list goes on and on and on and on. And amongst them is arguably the most common false refuge of the relationship. We're led to believe that once we find this perfect person, that no matter what happens in our lives, we can go to them as a refuge. They will always be able to put a smile on us face. They're always going to be able to make us happy. And we in turn will be able to do the same for them. Whenever we're in the room, they'll be full of joy. and that we're going to make each other feel complete. This idea for me in past relationships, it has caused a lot of problems, because it's actually how I expected love to be, it's how I thought it was supposed to be. Of course I did, it's a huge ego trip, right? Being able to make someone happy whenever, that someone's going to completely adore you. And as I've said in talks in the past, my ego can be quite substantial sometimes. The thing is, of course, it can't actually be like that. If we refuse to accept that, then we end up feeling really frustrated and annoyed. In past relationships, an ex-girlfriend of mine, when she was feeling down or upset or a little bit low, for one reason or another, found myself feeling really frustrated, not being able to understand and just showing no real compassion or empathy at all, and even feeling a little bit angry about it. I felt like it was a personal affront to me, like, why can't I make her happy? Doesn't she love me fully? Aren't I enough for her? You know, and other equally ridiculous, self-obsessed rubbish. You see what I mean about the ego thing? I also felt myself feeling frustrated when they couldn't understand how I was feeling, or they couldn't make me happy all the time. They're unable to understand how I'm feeling. Of course, this causes arguments and friction between you, and eventually creates a distance between you. The truth is, to expect someone to be able to make you happy, and expect to be able to make someone else happy just because you're there for them and they have you, it's completely unfair, actually. It's a bit selfish, it's self-absorbed, in fact. It's thinking about yourself as the be-all and end-all, and not seeing the other person as they really are, as another living being with a life of their own, with thoughts of their own, with feelings of their own, with problems of their own, and conditions that most of the time have got absolutely nothing to do with you. All of my ex-girlfriends were living beings in their own right. They all had conditions in their life that affected their emotions and feelings, that just had nothing to do with me at all. And of course, being that they've got their own stuff going on, they can't be there to make me happy all the time. They can't be that one thing that I can rely on, because they've got their own stuff going on. To expect them to be able to make me happy all the time isn't to see them as a person, it's to see them as a tool for my own benefit. It doesn't only cause arguments between you, it actually stops you making any real meaningful connection with another person, because you can't connect with the tool. By expecting this perfect movie romantic love, that's what I was doing. I was relegating another human being to a tool for my benefit instead of seeing them as a person. So another reason a relationship isn't safe refuge is because at the end of the day it's taking refuge in a person, and a person is a conditioned thing. And when it comes to conditioned things, you know, we can't predict what's going to happen, we can't predict the future, anything could happen. Your partner could go off you could go off your partner. They may change in a way that you no longer like, or you may change in a way that they no longer like. One of you may get ill, or even if you get up to a right old age, eventually one of you is going to die, and you might not even get old before that happens. You just don't know, it could happen tomorrow. We can nurture our relationships and try and make it work, and we can create the conditions for it to thrive, but ultimately we've got no real control over the condition. The only safe refuges we've got, according to Buddhist tradition, are the three jewels. If we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, then even after we've tried everything, our relationship falls apart, and we're less likely to fall apart with it. We've got something more meaningful at the centre of our lives, something that is unconditioned, that we can hang on to, and that is greater than us and greater than the relationship. I just want to finish by saying some people might think, well, then what's the point in getting a relationship? What's the point in continuing a relationship if it could all just fall apart tomorrow? But for me, knowing these things, it's enabled me to actually be in a far stronger and deeper relationship than I've ever been in before. It's enabled me to enter in a relationship with someone and to really be open to who she is. to not put too much expectations on the relationship or to project onto Sophie what I think she should be. It's allowed me to fully be in a relationship because I'm open to her. It's allowed me for the first time to let go of this idea of what a relationship should be and be in a relationship. And I think that's what love really is. It's not this romantic myth that we're told it is, that's in the movies, but it's really being open to someone for what they are, who they are, and delighting in them for that. And for really feeling our connection with them. And once we can do this with one person, we can begin to open ourselves to do it with other people, and then begin to see the truth of our interconnected being with others. Thank you.
Okay, so my shocking Buddhist idea. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in this world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in this world. They are pacified by love. Okay, that's from the Dhammapada, over that book over there, which is a collection of the Buddha's sayings. And it probably doesn't, it's not that shocking, really, is it? You know, it's kind of like, we all kind of know that. However, what is shocking is we just don't live from it at all. So the reason it's, I'd actually written another talk altogether. But I've been thinking so much with the attacks that happened on Friday in Paris, and then learning from those attacks about, all the other. So basically, I go on Facebook a lot, and on Facebook there was all this stuff about kind of, Paris, and people kind of really showing their solidarity with people in Paris. And then people started putting on stuff about, yes, but what happened in Lebanon, in Beirut, what happened in Kenya, what happened in Syria, so all these other countries as well. And so what I kind of came across was this whole list of different atrocities, cruelties, violence that had happened to people. And it really made me think, actually. I really started to think about what I'm doing as a person with my life. So what I wanted to do was, just share some of my reflections, actually, today. So, not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in this world. So why? I think I feel like I need to do is I need to really know that. I really need to know that and understand it and think about it. So my first question for myself has to be, do I really believe it? And I suppose an obvious reason why, not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified, comes from another verse in the Dhammapada. Victory begets hatred for the defeated. No, victory begets hatred for the defeated one experiences suffering. So victory begets hatred for the defeated one experiences suffering. So basically, if you suffer, particularly if somebody's done something violent to you, then you start to feel hatred, so you want to go out and create more hatred to kind of get your revenge, make things right in the world. And then, of course, those people that you've damaged, they want to do the same thing back to you. And so it goes round and round and round. And it's kind of, we all know it. You can look at history and you can see it happening again, again, again. So I suppose I need to look at my own experience in my own life. So I live a very, 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 very privileged life. So, I have never been bombed. I've never had to experience a whole load of racism day in, day out. I've never lost a loved person, a loved one, suddenly in violence. So I've lived a very a life where actually I haven't had any strong triggers that are likely to bring out violence in me. However, I still live in a way where I don't think I really put that verse into practice. So I bear grudges, I keep people at arm's length. I kind of if someone's a bit funny with me, well, I'm a bit funny with them. It's like I keep it going like that. And it's interesting because actually last week I was with somebody who I've had this kind of ongoing, we're a bit cool with each other kind of thing going on. And we were in a meeting together and she really turned to me and she said something I said, she said, oh, I can really see that. And she could see that thing that I was talking about, that I was suffering. And it broke something for me. It was wonderful. I thought, oh, my heart goes out to you as a person. It's like, because she'd reached to me, because she'd broken through our slightly funny thing with each other, we actually had a connection going. And I thought, in a very small way, that is breaking that cycle of a type of violence. That is something that we can do. So I suppose, following on from all the Facebook stuff, now, actually, nobody on my Facebook feed has brought up anything which I've disagreed with, but I've seen some other people writing about stuff where somebody said something like, oh, I don't know, we shouldn't let any more refugees into the country now, or these, Muslims are really violent, those kind of Islam's a really violent religion, all those kind of stuff. And it's that I find really difficult. It's interesting that I can feel my own emotion rising in response to that. It's like I am not actually able to believe. When somebody says something that I find offensive like that, it's really difficult for me to respond with love. That's what I'm trying to get across, actually. I find it really difficult to respond with love. And I don't really know how to respond. So I suppose one thing I've been thinking about, well, what do I mean by love? What do I mean by love? And I suppose it's a place which would be where if by love is meant metta, by metta I mean loving kindness, so it's wanting the best for a person. So, love might not mean I agree with you, okay? It might not mean that I even think that it's good what the person's saying and allow them to say it, perhaps. It might mean that I need to do something which is, might seem quite strong, because I don't think Buddhist love is about allowing yourself to be walked over at all. But what it means is it needs to come from a place in me which is seeing the humanity of that person and understanding where they come from, understanding the conditions that might have led them to behave in a way like that. Because I know that if somebody meets me with that situation, I'm much more likely to hear and respond. But if somebody kind of, just sees me as not really a person who's intelligent or got any ideas, I'm not going to respond to that. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here is it's about how I want to respond to somebody when they say ideas that I don't agree with, is to have a certain level of openness, a certain level of being willing to engage with them in discussion so that we can work out together, so I can understand them more. Okay. So another response I had, I think, to the violence in the world has been a sense of kind of helplessness, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of what can I do? What can I do? Is my life as a Buddhist, doing what I do, is that enough, actually? And I've really been reflecting about that because what I thought I'd do is I'd look at the life of the Buddha. So if you look at the life of the Buddha, in a way what happened is he had a strong experience of seeing suffering. So the story is that he lived, and here's just a story, but anyway, the story is he lived in a palace and he didn't see any suffering in that palace at all. But one day he was able to go out of the palace and he saw on various different ships, he saw someone who was old, somebody who was sick, and a dead body. And it really shocked him. He saw the suffering in the world. He saw the impermanence. He saw, the bad things happen. And it really shocked him. But what helped him? What helped him was seeing what's called the fourth sight. And the fourth sight was a wandering monk type person. I kind of imagine them as being just really quite happy and relaxed and calm amidst the chaos. Just wandering through life in a sense of a person who's very grounded, who knows what they're doing, a kind person, and a person who is able to somehow be in the world in a loving way. So that's what he saw. He saw the fourth sight. And the fourth sight had a big effect on him, because what he did is he left home, he went forth, and he spent a long time trying to work out, I suppose, a way to be with suffering. Various things did, but one thing, no, I'm not going to tell his whole story, but basically what he put together was the various paths that we too can follow. So he understood reality, he woke up, he saw how things worked, and he gave us some paths that we can follow. And one of those paths he described as being about how it's greed, hatred, and delusion that kind of keeps us going round and round. So if you were here for the series on the Wheel of Life, You'd have seen in the middle of the wheel of life, we have these symbols that represent greed, hatred, delusion. Delusion is ignorance of how things are and how it keeps us going round and round and round. A bit like I was talking before, there's this cycle of violence. It just keeps us, we're in there. We don't have any control over what we're doing. It just keeps us going. So, what I think is that, and what he suggested, or what he taught us to do, is various paths which allow us to become kinder, more generous, more open, wiser people. And I suppose what I worked out in the end from my reflections is I thought, well, actually, that is all that we can do. And it's kind of a bit frustrating because I wish there was an easy answer. I so wish there was an easy answer. But all that we can do is we have to go to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem in all of us is our greed, our hatred, and our ignorance of how things we are. So actually, we're very lucky in this community because we've come across the Buddha's teachings. And we have seen a path out of the suffering, a path out of violence. And and I think we have many practices that can help us, I suppose, develop the bigger heart, the warmer heart, the kindness, the generosity, the wisdom. The first practice I think is really, really important is the metta bhavana. Okay, and the metta bhavana, we teach it week 3 of the newcomers course, but it is not a practice for, I just think it's a big practice. What do I mean? It's not just like a kind of beginner's practice. It is an amazing practice. And I think the more I do it, the more I realise how radical it is. Because basically we're turning away from that violence. What we do with the metta bhavana is we imaginatively identify with other people. Whether we like them or not, it doesn't matter. Whether we know them or not, it doesn't matter. Where they live, it doesn't matter. We're trying to build up this sense of identification that all beings, just like us, suffer and they want to be happy. They want to be free from suffering. And I think the metta bhavana is a really radical thing to do. And I think we should all do it more, and we should all be doing it on and off the cushion as well. And we should be teaching people the metta bhavana, actually. I listened to a talk by Sanghagita, which he wrote in 1984, called something like Nuclear Disarmament, World Peace and Buddhism. And he says lots of really interesting things in that talk, but one thing he says is do the metta bhavana on a mass scale. Okay? And that kind of really intrigued me. I thought, what does that mean? What would that look like? One thing I thought it could look like is a bit like as we do, mindfulness is becoming a secular kind of thing. Let's take compassion and love out into the world. We could all be learning to do a practice like the metta bhavana. It could become a much more kind of common thing to do. You don't have to be a Buddhist to do it. But you could argue it makes you a Buddhist if you do it. Anyway, so we could, so doing the metta bhavana. And then the second thing I think that we have here, which is really excellent, is the Sangha. It's the fact that we create together a community in which we can be loving, where we can work on the greed, the delusion, the anger in us, where we can actively be with other people doing that. And Sanghagita writes about the idea of a nucleus of a new society, that if there are places where people are living in a different way, then that will have an effect on the rest of society. So I suppose what I feel, having considered all this, is I feel like a confidence in my Buddhist practice. I feel like I stand strong in my Buddhist practice. And I feel like my aim is to do what I can to become a fourth sight. The world needs fourth sights. Just as the Buddha had a fourth sight, just as the Buddha himself has been a fourth sight to me, the world needs to see a different way of being. And I can do that myself, and we can do it together. It's great to be here with this community of people where all of us have that in common.